CBD is changing laws around the country, but we found these field tests police use to detect marijuana have not kept up. And even state labs are now scrambling to upgrade their tests so cannabis confusion doesn't land innocent people in jail. You can find CBD everywhere, from the shadows of pot parties to the shelves of big box stores.
I fell in love with it.
Michael is an avid golfer who suffers back pain and wanted to share his relief with others.
It actually does help.
It's derived from the hemp plant and won't get you high. Michael started selling it at parties.
I wasn't worried about getting arrested because I was confident in our products.
But that confidence was tested when D.C. police raided a party and placed samples of Michael's products into disposable field tests like these. What did you think when the test turned positive?
I was shocked.
The same thing happened when the News 4 I-team put the tests to the test.
I'd say that's pretty purple.
We ordered field kits from police supply websites and bought all kinds of CBD products. Even when the seller's private lab tests showed the product contained no THC, which is what gets marijuana users high, CBD oils, chocolates, gummies, even dog treats all tested positive as marijuana.
That's not a surprise to me. The test was designed to do that.
The lead chemist at DC's Department of Forensic Science tested actual marijuana and CBD side by side for our camera using the same chemicals found in police field tests. He says those tests are designed as a quick, easy way for police to detect cannabinoids. That includes THC and CBD.
If it contains THC or any cannabinoid, it would turn this field test purple.
No matter what kind of product it is.
Yes.
Which isn't necessarily a problem in the district, where you can have up to 2 ounces of marijuana legally. And the few cases that do go to court first get verified in the lab. But in Virginia, you can be convicted of simple possession based on an officer's marijuana field test. And the I-team found that isn't the only testing failure that can get you in trouble.
I don't know why they would target me.
Meet Kyle Traw. He allowed our camera inside his licensed business that sells CBD, but declined to do a formal interview because he has a pending felony charge for distribution of marijuana.
The big concern was whether or not there were illegal substances in those products.
Fredericksburg police say, acting on a tip, a detective went undercover and bought plant products like this one. It does look and smell a lot like the real thing, but the packaging says it's CBD that contains under 0.3% THC.
All of those products came back and tested positive for marijuana.
They raided Kyle's store in March, just 6 days after Virginia law changed the definition of marijuana. Now it allows the sale of hemp products like CBD as long as they contain only a trace of THC, no greater than 0.3%. Police didn't know about that new law.
They didn't even test for the amount of THC that was there.
To my knowledge, they did not.
The I-team found they couldn't have because Virginia's state forensic lab does not have that capability. Before, the lab was only asked to identify whether a substance contained THC. The amount never mattered.
We are working on getting a method up and running for that particular analysis.
Virginia's director of forensic science says the lab can measure the amount of THC in oils, but no other CBD products. After the I-team asked about it, she says the rest of the evidence testing is now on hold.
I definitely don't want anyone to go to jail if they were not breaking some law.
She plans to send a letter to every prosecutor and police department in Virginia, warning of the potential for CBD to test positive as marijuana.
It's important for them to understand what the limitations of our testing are.
What that means for Kyle's case is still unclear, but he's already had to pay a lawyer and go to court.
Even if you're found not guilty, court fees, lawyers, all that, it adds up.
In D.C., Michael ended up convincing the officer not to arrest him, with lab tests proving what was in his products.
I showed him my documentation.
But he knows not every CBD user will have that chance and wonders about the pain positive field tests could cause.
I think they need to upgrade their equipment to be able to better handle that. Could really ruin somebody's life.
We reached out to the makers of those police field tests but did not hear back. Some of them say right on the box that results must be verified in a lab. Now, Virginia's lab director told me tests to determine the amount of THC should be ready this summer. So what do you do about all of this in the meantime? It's probably best to keep your CBD products in their original packaging.
Police and prosecutors around Virginia will have to change the way they handle marijuana cases after the state lab issued a warning late Thursday saying Their testing capabilities are not in line with new law. Just yesterday, a News 4i team investigation revealed the problem. Investigative reporter Jody Fleischer is in our newsroom with what this all means going forward. Jody?
The problem is really twofold. First, these field tests used by police around the country to identify marijuana also turn positive when testing CBD. The tests can't tell the difference. In this letter, Virginia's director of forensic science warns about that and the state lab's limitations on testing. Virginia's law changed the definition of marijuana back in March to allow for industrial hemp and hemp-derived products like CBD. Those products are now allowed to have trace amounts of THC, no greater than 0.3%. That's the component that can get users high. But the state forensic labs can only measure that percentage in oils. They're still working on getting equipment up and running to measure the amount of THC in plant material, edibles, and other products. Once the labs develop that capability, it will be used to test evidence from cases where the plant material is, quote, packaged and labeled as a hemp product, or if the defendant claims the product is in compliance with the new law. Our investigation found Virginia's evidence labs cannot positively identify some marijuana products because there's currently no test to measure the amount of THC. One delegate acknowledged no one checked to make sure that was possible before enacting a law that made it essential. In a criminal justice system that relies on scientific evidence and laboratory testing, Department of Forensic Science Director Linda Jackson says the results at her state labs must be accurate.
The new law has definitely complicated all of this.
Before Virginia law changed the definition of marijuana in March, tests only had to determine whether products contain THC. That's the component that gets users high. Now that the definition allows for hemp products like CBD to have trace amounts of THC no greater than 0.3%, the labs must be able to determine the exact amount.
Sometimes the law runs ahead of technology.
Delegate Mark Keem co-sponsored that marijuana bill, which he says took effect as emergency legislation so agricultural production of industrial hemp could begin immediately. But the criminal justice part of the law has left people like Kyle Traw in legal limbo. Fredericksburg police arrested the store owner for selling marijuana. He told the News 4i team it was all CBD.
One thing that we never wanted to do was put innocent people in jeopardy, legal jeopardy.
Keem acknowledges it's tough for police and prosecutors to be aware of every new law immediately. And when the state lab initially tested some of Kyle's products, they did have THC. We just don't know how much. To complicate things even further, the field tests police use to identify marijuana also come back positive for CBD. They can't tell the difference because they're only designed to detect cannabinoids, which CBD and marijuana both are. Virginia law currently allows officers to use those field tests as evidence in court.
Until we fix the law itself, the only thing we can do as legislators is to urge our executive branch partners to ensure that this is not a place that they should be prosecuting.
The law also makes a distinction between testing of plants and testing of hemp products. But take a look at what police seized at Kyle's store. It says CBD hemp flowers on the packaging and that it's under 0.3% THC. Is it a plant or a product? Delegate Keem says the laws could use some clarification. But you think that there will be a criminal justice look at these marijuana and CBD related laws for next year?
Oh, no doubt. I believe that will happen. And thanks to your work and the investigation that your team has done, it's really shed light on those gaps in our laws and the policies that we have in place.
The lab director told me evidence that requires the more advanced testing will now be on hold until those tests are up and running, hopefully in the next couple of months. In the meantime, she's warned police and prosecutors about the testing limitations so they can make appropriate decisions about criminal cases.
Investigative reporter Jody Fleischer tells us about a possible solution to that and why police in our area aren't using it yet.
From a store owner in Fredericksburg, Virginia, to a great-grandmother at Disney World in Florida.
I was in shock. I didn't really know what was going on.
Police around the country keep arresting users and sellers of hemp-derived CBD. It's made from the same cannabis plant as marijuana, but CBD won't get you high.
It smells the same, it looks the same.
Chris Martinez is president of Evio Labs in Florida and says it's very difficult for officers to tell which is which without testing it in a lab.
As the I-Team exposed earlier this year, these police field tests only detect cannabinoids, so the tests turn purple or positive when testing marijuana or CBD products.
We saw a lot of people being arrested and charged for possession of cannabis. When quantitated in a lab, we saw that it was actually hemp product.
Turns out police in Switzerland were having the same problem more than a year ago.
Police officer had no chance to distinguish these two kinds of material.
Meet Chief Scientist Michael Bovens, who spoke to us via Skype from the Zurich Forensic Science Institute, where a chemist developed a new test.
It looks like this material.
It's similar to the old one, but the chemicals inside turn pink for products with a higher concentration of CBD or blue if it's mostly marijuana. The Swiss police tested hundreds of samples, which they then verified in the lab.
The rate of positive THC and positive CBD results was close to 100%.
They found a company to manufacture the tests. The News 4 I-Team requested a shipment so we could try them out too. The marijuana was the only thing to turn blue. All of the CBD products, from gummies to flour to dog treats, turned pink. Now the Florida lab is also testing the Swiss tests.
We wanted to take this product and really put it to the ringer.
Like whether they hold up after sitting in a patrol car over time and in extreme hot or cold temperatures.
Everyone's really eager to see the validation of it and see if it works.
That's because law enforcement agencies across Florida have already ordered nearly 25,000 tests.
We wanted to get ahead of the game.
Chief Constance Stanley knows demand around the country will be high and wants her officers to be able to distinguish pot from CBD.
We definitely don't want to put anyone who's innocent in jail.
The sheriff in her county even issued a legal bulletin saying all current THC test kits must be disposed of and replaced with the new test kits.
I think with the way laws are changing in each state, this could blow up probably overnight.
John Waldheim quickly signed on as a distributor when Florida law changed in June, making CBD products legal if they contain only trace amounts of THC. It's the same law change Virginia adopted back in March. But to date, there are no orders from the Commonwealth.
The red tape in each state is different.
The head of Virginia's Department of Forensic Science told the I-Team she's now testing 100 of the Swiss tests in the state lab to validate their accuracy.
So that everyone would understand what it really can tell you and what it can't tell you.
She's warned prosecutors and law enforcement about the old test's limitations, but they are still the only ones her agency has approved for use.
Those regulations would need to be altered to include the use of another test,
which she says could happen in the coming weeks. But at this rate, Virginia law enforcement might have a bit of a wait.
Can you order these things fast enough?
I can't.
And he says the manufacturer can't make them fast enough. Swiss police thought they were developing a product just for themselves. They've been using it since last September.
We are happy if the test is used successfully in other countries as well, of course.
Chris Martinez says the results so far are positive.
If this does prove to be true, I think honestly this is going to definitely help a lot of people stay out of jail.
Today, the board that oversees the Department of Forensic Science discussed many of the same issues we've been investigating for months.
It's going to continue to evolve. I'm sure there's going to be additional legislation around this issue.
At Wednesday's state board meeting in Richmond, the head of Virginia's Department of Forensic Science said officers need to be able to tell the difference between illegal marijuana and its now legal cousin CBD. And as the I-Team showed in May, the field tests Virginia officers have been using cannot do that.
I'm asking a lot of questions about the issue because it is complicated and the tests are evolving.
Herndon Police Chief Maggie DeBoard was particularly interested in hearing about new tests from Switzerland that the state lab has been working to validate.
There's been stories about it on the news.
The I-Team tested them earlier this month and showed how Florida law enforcement have been rushing to order the Swiss tests since their state law changed in June. Virginia's law changed back in March to legalize hemp products with low amounts of THC.
It's pretty clear that that test is an extra tool for the officers to be able to determine whether something is truly marijuana or it's hemp.
The Commonwealth will now use grant money left over from another project to buy 15,000 of the Swiss tests for officers to use after first conducting the older test to see if any cannabinoids are present.
I think that it's imperative that they are used in tandem.
She says that's because the Swiss tests aren't perfect either, but they can tell if something is more likely CBD, as long as the test is done properly.
We have already developed an instruction sheet for law enforcement.
Virginia is also working on a training video to educate officers on the issue and how the new tests work. The Herndon chief says the more information, the better.
The more tools we have, the better we can, do our job out there efficiently.
Officers will still have the opportunity to send suspected marijuana to the state lab to be verified. And in cases that require knowing the exact amount of THC in a hemp product, the state is working on developing a lab test to be able to do that too. Jody Fleischer, News 4 I-Team.